like most babies, smells like butter. Today on the Manspace. Welcome to the Manspace podcast. We're your hosts, Doctors Matt Brown and Rob Porter, and clinical therapist Mike Porter. Welcome, Spacemen. For those of you who don't know, that was a Dave Grohl reference. Do you know what song that is, Matt? Mike, I'm assuming you don't know that song.
Scentless Apprentice.
Scentless Apprentice.
Which has one of the most solid drum intros.
Oh, I freaking love it. Ever. That drum beat. I used to try to play it when we'd switch out instruments after band practice, and it was always like, Rob, stop, you suck at that. It's hard to do. I bet Stuart could do it. I was trying to teach him to do it. I think Dave Grohl wrote that one.
Did he get it? Now, Kurt Cobain, like the lyrics?
Yeah, if you look at the songwriters, he's listed first.
That's weird because there's some reference in the book to that exact line about Kurt making weird observations and also having just become a new father.
I remember thinking of that "smells like butter" thing.
Yeah, I don't.
When he said that.
With Stuart, dude, the only way he'd be able to play that is if he got a new pedal for his bass drum, because the one that I gave you sucks.
I think he might have actually. He's been the only thing he's replaced all. He's got 2 crashes now. I'm like, what? Come on, man, slow down. He keeps spending all his money. He worked 40 hours a week this summer. 3 weeks of the summer. I was like, really? That's he works at the bike shop.
Bike shop, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I was like, dude, I don't think he can actually make you work. He's like, because he's getting all burned out. He's like, I just feel a loyalty to it. It's like, I mean, but he spends all his money on drum stuff now. So we're always getting something shipped to us. And I'm like, oh, looks like he's bought a new whatever. And so I think he bought a new pedal, but I've been listening to him and he's been working on his punk drumming, fast drumming. And I'm always like, whenever I hear dudes doing fast kick without a double kick, I'm like, how's he doing that? It's that, whatever it is, you kind of bounce, you slide your foot back and forth. It's not like actually this, but he's freaking solid at it. You guys should come hear our band Driving in Suits play. The funniest part is, I'm always trying to screw off because I'm like, you guys, this is supposed to be fun. We're not doing anything with this. But my daughter holds herself to a high standard. So she's like, was I flat on those notes? It's like, not like she sings really freaking well. It used to be that when she was younger, I'd be like, hey, sing me a D. And she'd pause for a second, then she'd just sing it. She'd just throw out a D, and then I'd play a D on my guitar. Wow. Freaking nailed it.
That's
so
crazy.
She sings she's usually got maybe a half of a song of solidifying, so she's not going sharp or flat, and then she's perfect the whole time. So I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she's doing all this soloing stuff that I'm like, I could never do that crap. So it's freaking awesome. I'm the bass player over there like a moron. I'm pretty sure I can play bass, guys. It's freaking fun, dude. I've decided I'm figuring out or rewriting whatever. I'm covering Taylor Swift's Trouble. We're going to make it punk. It's going to be so good, dude. You're welcome. All of this thanks to Dave Grohl. Spacemen, if you have forgotten, go get your book out. Your book, The Storyteller by Dave Grohl. We're talking about it today. And I freaking loved this book. I'm pretty sure I'm going to tell my kids to listen to it, even though there's lots of F words in it.
I was telling a guy today, and I said, well, you'll have to be okay with a lot of F words.
Mm-hmm. Dude, it is, well, Mike apparently read it like a weirdo.
He puts
on his,
because I bought it at the airport.
You guys put on your old man reading glasses and turned on a light and read a book. I listened to
true.
it, which I can't recommend enough. And actually, I probably got a little bit extra than you guys did at the end. I think I probably got some extra sections because mine
No.
was
I
like,
don't know, man. I got
does
him
it
too.
say?
It's the expanded
Oh.
edition
Okay, all right.
because there's more to tell.
Which is really funny. I will say this. I was kind of surprised in the More to Tell that he did not talk about Taylor Hawkins' death.
Or his mom. I don't know
Yeah.
when. Like that song he
I
just
mean,
wrote about his mom.
Let's
is
see,
like,
when was it added, though?
well, it looks like
yeah, I don't know.
he mentions in the end, he mentions the Grammys in 2022, and Taylor Hawkins died in March of 2022, and the Grammys were in April of 2022. So I feel like he talks so much about how, when he found Taylor, he found his like soulmate essentially. It was like fascinating that he didn't even mention that part of it. I was also totally fascinated
2023.
by how brief the Nirvana section was. Because in my mind, first and foremost, Dave Grohl was the drummer for Nirvana.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but don't
for
you think
such a
some of that
short
is
time in their life as a band too? So
Yeah.
well? And he, like, I swear he talks about, like, Kurt Cobain was really kind of more the driving force of that band, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No question.
Well, and I will
I
say,
think, right, from a musician standpoint,
yeah,
he, probably a little less influence and
Well, and it was already
and as amazing as it was, his time in Washington was pretty
7
dark.
years.
Like that when the
Yeah.
freaking haunted house in Seattle, and then like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys ever like the house that he lived in Olympia is depressing. It's right by the AM PM, like I was telling you with the 3 corn dogs for $1 deal
Yeah.
that he subsisted on. That was like my high school lunch too.
I just think it's interesting because like Nirvana was such a big deal. And I know Foo Fighters has been his band for like 20, 25 years now or more. But it's like Nirvana was the bigger band. Even though
You
he
think
came
so?
oh, no question. Nirvana was way more impactful than Foo Fighters is. I understand that Foo Fighters is a big band, but nobody looks and says Foo Fighters revolutionized
No,
music.
that's true. That's true.
And that's he
In that
references
aspect,
that.
yes.
Like in the book, he talks about how, we as soon as this song started to break and as soon as it made it onto MTV, my life changed forever, and so did yours. Which is true. Like this, it did massive things for music, even though those songs were totally like we play In Bloom with our Driving in Suits, and it's like the most boring, simple song. But it's like, well, man, it was huge back then. But it's just funny to me.
Well, like the drum stuff too, like Smells Like Teen Spirit. I watched a video after I read the book, and he's like talking about where he not stole, I
disco
guess, but
beats.
Like,
yeah.
The 70s disco.
Yeah.
Like the
I
Gap
seen some
Band
video.
and
Yeah, he's talking to some drummer from a disco band, and he's like, I stole your beat. And the guy goes, I know. I could hear you doing it in this song. Here's what I'll start with this book. Like, it did fascinate me how, although it's kind of funny because if you think about him and Kurt Cobain, I think I didn't realize until I don't know how many years ago that he was not the drummer for Bleach, but that he came in after that one, and even after some of the songs for Smells Like Teen, or Nevermind. So it makes sense that like, yeah, he joined this band because someone said, hey, they're looking for a drummer. And so he joined this band, moved up there. He wasn't from there. So it wasn't like they were lifelong buddies. So it would make sense that the stories he tells are all about other people who are more impactful and more significant. It's just so fascinating because in my mind, the reference point was this. And it was such a brief blip in the book. It's like, oh, just like a chapter or two talking about Nirvana. You just skimmed over okay, cool. Like, I don't know why that fascinated me so much. It's just I guess it is because I think Nirvana in my brain was a way bigger band, despite nowhere near the discography or songs written or tours or anything like that. He would have made way more money off of Foo Fighters than he did off Nirvana, but it feels like the bigger band was Nirvana.
I think though like one of the biggest running themes throughout the whole thing is like deep relationships and like all these connections.
No, I
And
freaking
he doesn't
love
ever
it.
come out and say it, but I've like watched enough videos where I'm like, I don't really think he liked Kurt Cobain. Like Kurt Cobain was a real downer, and like
Yeah.
he
Well,
was kind of he's totally different personality wise. And I think like
yeah.
Yeah.
as much as it was a super successful thing, it like exploded out of nowhere. They were young, and I think he was like, I'm really not having fun. Like this is
Right.
really
Yeah.
hard. Like this guy's hard to
Yeah.
work with, and obviously devastated when he died. But like, I think everybody kind of talks about it like, oh man, you lost your deep friend. It's like, no, Chris Novoselic and Kurt were friends since like
Yeah.
middle school or whatever.
Mhm.
But like, it wasn't like Taylor Hawkins.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and that's like one of the things that struck me is because you'll always hear, right, like musicians talk about they don't want to let the fans down. And he tells the story early when he breaks his leg in like Sweden,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like in the middle of a show. And like listening to him, like it wasn't like to me hearing that, hearing a musician talk about, I don't want to let the fans down. It always felt slightly, I don't know, self-aggrandizing, I guess. Yeah. Like, but with him, it felt like this legitimate, genuine, like, no, this is like it was important to him that they enjoy themselves, that they have the experience they paid to come have, to the point where he's having this Swedish doctor hold his foot in place because he refuses to give up an hour to drive to the hospital and get casted.
I like the way he's like,
come back
when he tells the guy, well, you're coming on stage with me.
right. Said I would have to hold then I guess you're coming on stage. And it was like, also like, again, that's the first time I think that story, I think, is when it was the first time I realized that it stood out to me that he mentioned Taylor Hawkins and the relationship they had.
Yeah. Cause he told him they made eyes or whatever. And he's like, you got to keep the show going. So yeah.
Yeah. And without missing a beat, he's up there going through and he's singing instead of, Dave. Yeah. The relationship's really like just, yeah.
Well, it is funny with the Nirvana thing, because with Kurt Cobain, that it's like, yeah, he was a significant person in his life for a period of time, really only 3.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about that one show where things start to go south. I can't remember where they were, but and Kurt goes over and smashes a mixing board. And then they keep playing the show, because he's like, I could see in Kurt, he was getting angry. And he's like, it wasn't good when that happens. Like it was, it's the one too where I think he smashed his guitar in the back of the bouncer's head on accident or whatever. And so he's like, I could see that this wasn't going to go well. And he's like, everyone else would have seen this as like our thing that we do. We smash our instruments. But he's like, I knew Kurt was pissed. And it sounds like, interesting too, to listen to Nirvana. It sounds like it was almost doomed from the beginning. Like Kurt wanted to be big, but did not want to be big. And so as soon as they started, he was immediately almost fighting against it and getting depressed, which I've heard before about, like, the irony of Pearl Jam and how they were able to stay kind of actually doing what they wanted to do and didn't get sucked in the way Nirvana got sucked in, and Kurt kind of hated that. So it is interesting that I guess I thought in my brain, Kurt was always a bigger deal in relationships, but it's funny to listen to him talk about, his best friend's mom, Jimmy's mom, and is it Jimmy's mom who's meeting, what's his name? Neil Diamond, and Neil Diamond literally gives her the shirt off his back. It's like, makes you love Neil Diamond. And here's the other, I'll say this too, and then I want to talk about some themes and things that specifically I think would be helpful to anybody who reads this book, but men in particular. But one of my favorite things about this book is when you're reading it, and especially for me listening to it, because Dave Grohl narrates it, it sounds like listening to a fanboy talk about meeting all his idols. Mm-hmm. It never sounds like, he never sounds full of himself or pretentious. He talks about, apparently he must be like best friends with Paul McCartney. He references multiple times Paul McCartney teaching his daughter to play piano, or he talks about when he had to sing Blackbird at the Grammys and how nervous he was, and how he's like, I talked to Paul McCartney about it, and I was like, you just calling up and chatting with Paul? Because Paul's like, what song you singing? He's like, Blackbird. And he says, Paul goes, ooh, cheeky. It's not like, it's like he wasn't calling up to say, hey, Paul, they're asking me to sing your song. He's like, I'm nervous about singing this song. What song is it? So it's not like there's something about him that's so endearing. That's because it just seems like this is a guy who is constantly like excited by and amazed by his life playing out the way it's playing out. Like the way his wife's like, hey, would you mind if AC/DC comes to dinner tonight? It's like, what? But he seems so surprised by it all the time. Like, I couldn't believe I'm meeting AC/DC. I was like, you're Dave freaking Grohl. Like, I don't, it's so delightful the way when you're reading it, it's like, it feels like you're living the life he's describing, and somehow he's not a celebrity in the slightest. He's always shocked by meeting a president or playing at the White House or whatever. And just listening to him talk about getting nervous to sing at the Grammys, I was like, you seriously were nervous to sing at the Grammys? Or not, it was the Oscars, but I mean, he sang at the Grammys too at another time. But anyway, it's just kind of that was one of my favorite parts, was he feels like if I met Dave Grohl, I think we would be best friends. Because he's just a nice dude, it seems like. I'm sure he's a jerk other times, but who isn't? So here's one question I have for you. Like, the first question I have is, what is the theme or themes that you feel like come out of this book that were either intentional or unintentional? Just something you picked up that felt like this was one of the most valuable things for me in this book.
Thing or things?
A theme or themes.
No, yeah. I think, like, for me, there are like three big ones. One is like, you really do have to just like deeply connect with yourself and be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a struggle for everybody, right? Like,
yeah.
And I don't think that it's wise to say like everybody can just pursue their passion and be able to put bread on the table. But like
Mike Rowe would say, definitely don't do that.
Yeah. Some people that happens. And I think maybe their passion is so big that like, it just, when they manifest it in their lives, it's like big enough to provide everything that they need. So, but I think the other one is like the power of a parent who can like get over their own fear and get out of the way so you can be you. And then, just the like the deep, like the deep relationships with all the people, but also like I think it just kind of expanded my perspective on relationships a bit, that it's like you have these people that are really close to you that like kind of have nothing to do with your day to day. Like his childhood best friend, even though he was around, it's like, then he passed and, but he wasn't like in all the touring so much as, he wasn't a band member. He wasn't, but like relationships with things other than people, like, places, values, interests, and like things that really kind of help you feel alive. So, I mean, the whole thing is kind of like this, again, overcoming fears, doing the hard thing, and then experiencing the awe that comes from that. But the story, I think, when I think about the parent getting out of your way, like I'd heard that story about his mom before. There was some documentary where she was interviewed and she kind of like gave a truncated version of that story. But basically, like, she was like the beloved teacher at the high school, like all in on education. And then she's got the kid who's like the total screw off. And, that could go so many different ways as a parent. And she's got, his dad who's out of the picture, but also really critical and like, very kind of by the book I think he was a journalist, right, in DC.
Yeah, something like that.
So, but had expectations that he'd just like toe the line, but wasn't super involved. But then, as a mom who's like risking ridicule and going against everything that she thinks is important, to say to him, like, well, you got to go do this thing because like you're not going to be alive if you don't, basically. Like,
Yeah.
Like as much as maybe being a starving musician and not having enough resources to keep yourself afloat brings up fears of you like having to suffer or maybe risk your life. Like that dude was going to die some other way if he didn't go that way. He was like jumping off roofs and doing all sorts of stuff and like breaking himself up in a million different ways. So I thought that was really powerful. And then like what's not in the book is there's a podcast called Song Exploder.
Yeah.
There's an episode about his song that he wrote about his mom. And it's just this really kind of chaotic and then like surreal and like doesn't follow like any song structure. And he's just trying to capture the experience of like being with her as she's dying basically. And I think he showed it to her when he was like, or no, he didn't show it to her. He said if she heard it, I think the podcast's host asked like if she heard it, what do you think she'd say? She was like, she'd probably be like, "It's okay, Dave." Like, it's not great, but it's all right.
I've heard better.
Not your best work.
Yeah, I think some of those themes you're mentioning, Matt, were ones that some I didn't think of, but the relationships thing. Like I wondered the way he tells stories, and I like the way he talks about how for him he marks time by like albums and songs. Like I know, when this one came out, and that's when this was happening in my life, and so the significance he gives to certain things, and specifically like just listening to the way that Foo Fighters for some period of time involved, it had Pat Smear in it, and then it didn't have Pat Smear in it, and then it had Pat Smear in it again, who was with him in Nirvana, but he knew Pat Smear from before Nirvana. Or it had the guitar player for Scream in it, and he was in Scream that, for however long, 2 years or whatever it was. And thinking about how he seems to maintain these relationships with people across time. So much so that now it really seems like he's best friends with Paul McCartney, or all these musicians who, these huge people who are always saying, yeah, let's write songs together. When Joan Jett's like, hey, we should write some music together. And I think, yeah, it's probably because he's just a good dude who believes in the relationship. Like when he talked about Lemmy from, he doesn't mention the band. He's like, if you don't know what band I'm talking about, then we're done. We're done. We're not friends anymore. Lemmy from Motorhead.
I know that line, dude. When I read that, and I just pictured Lemmy like, "Sorry about your friend Kurt."
Yeah,
exactly. That's the voice that I heard in my head.
Sorry about your friend. Here's some speeds. But when he describes that, and he says, now I'm friends with Lemmy, and through all the times we just drank and smoked, and he talks about it, he says, because you realize that this is just another dude. Like when he said, sorry about your friend Kurt, I realized this is just another human. So he starts relating to all these people. It's like, they're all just humans that I want to connect with. And when you can connect with people this way, and it's why I read this about him afterwards. It wasn't part of the book, but that he's like mostly deaf in one ear now or something like that. And he's got some bad tinnitus because he refuses to wear in-ear monitors because he feels like it takes him out of the experience of being in with the audience. He had to wear them on the Oscars, and he mentions, I think that was the first time he ever wore it, because he had to have a click track because the orchestra was in a different building being piped in, and he had the tempo kept shifting in the song. And so he had to, but anyway, I think it just is just the want to make sure that the audience gets what they need from it or wants from it, so that he can have this experience with them. And his attempts to be back with his daughters. They're playing that show in Adelaide, and then he's got to fly out that night to be, over in LA to go to the daddy-daughter dance, and then immediately fly right back to go back to Perth to play their last show, and doing all these things because he wants to maintain all these relationships.
I think, right? Or something.
Yeah. The flight back was he had food poisoning, and he's like, but I can't puke. So I'd go into the bathroom and nothing would happen. But he's like, it's my personal version of hell for 20 hours, just feeling like I need to puke and poop, but I can't.
Yeah.
So, so that relationship was a big one in my head. The second one that was actually the biggest thing to me was, and I don't know if this is a personality thing. It's something that I feel like maybe I can develop that more in myself. But he talks a lot about kind of being on a road without a roadmap, or a path without knowing where I'm going next, and just kind of being open to what comes to me, and thinking about how I saw this. You guys know who Chappelle Roan is?
Yes.
So
It's
she's like
Chapel.
Chapel. Okay, Chapel Roan. I don't know what her real name is, but she's just some
She's a current pop singer.
Yeah, current pop singer who got big basically off of like
Lady
TikTok
Gaga-ish.
or YouTube, and she had I saw something that was like, my first show struggling, and it was just 50 people in the audience, and I was like, 50 people? I played shows to like 7 people, lady. And then she's like, and then it kind of makes it sound like after the struggle, now here I am at these sold out things at Lollapalooza and this and that. And it kind of cracked me up, because it was like, when I read up on her, I was like, she wrote a song, put it on YouTube in 2017, and was signed to Atlantic Records in 2017. And I was like,
gosh, yeah.
It doesn't sound like a real struggle. You listen to Dave Grohl's story about living on corn dogs, that he's like, honestly, it didn't taste good. It was just food for $1. I feel like that's a different kind of struggle. But hold on, Mike, before you say, because I didn't get to the theme. Then chime in. But the theme that I just like this idea of him being open to, like, it's okay. I can make this work. I can figure this out. Like the idea of like caring about something enough to say, I want to pursue this, but I'm not going to let my anxiety drive me about whether or not this could fail. I want to be open to what life brings me. It feels a little bit like the movie Walter Mitty to me, the Ben Stiller version, where it feels like, cool, man, I'm open to what comes, and we'll see what happens, and I'll figure it out. And I think, man, that sounds so refreshing to me, rather than trying to make sure I do this the quote unquote right way. At some point, Dave Grohl says, it's not thinking outside the box, F the box, right? He's like, just do what you do. Like, don't worry about if you should be doing it or not. Just do it the way you're going to do it. And some of his songwriting sounds like that. It's like, oh, you just wrote what you were feeling. Like, it doesn't follow any sense. But anyway, Mike, continue. I cut you off. Chapel?
Well, I was going to say, I've only ever owned. I mean, no, I don't own really any albums, but I only ever owned one Foo Fighters album, and it was Silence, Patience, Echoes, and Grace, I think is the name of it.
Yeah, the one that has the
Anyway.
Pretender on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe this is what all their albums are like, but that one felt remarkably eclectic to me. Like, it's got a song that's just a guitar. Like, it's called the Ballad of the Beaconsfield Miners.
Which-
he talks about it in the back of the book.
Yeah, it's near the end of the book. He talks about he wrote that because these miners in Beacon Hill, wherever it was in Tasmania, were trapped, and they asked for 3 things: food, water, while they were trapped, and an iPod with Foo Fighters music on it.
Yep.
So he wrote them a song the night before this guy showed up at the concert. He knew he was going to be there, so that he's like, that night I just wrote a song, and it was just instrumental. And he even says, I didn't know if it fit on the album, but I promised him I would put it on, so I did.
Yeah, it's like, before I knew the story of it, I freaking loved it. Like, I don't know enough about guitar to know if it's really impressive, but to me it is. Yeah. Like, I think it's a great song. And then he's got some songs on there that have this weird, like, to me they have like a 70s rock vibe. And then he's got a song called Home that he also references at the end of the book that he wrote about his, like, for his daughters and being on tour and stuff. And it's just him on a piano. That's it. and that's the thing. Like, it's so much of like, no, this is just these are all me.
Mm-hmm.
Like the pretender, like they're all him,
Right.
all of them. And it's like, he really does just kind of like, no, this is just, I'm going to do me. It's funny because the themes that stood out to me are pretty much what you guys talked about. The one of, you know, just don't think outside the box, F the box.
Yeah.
When he is, you know, going to the jazz club with his mom every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And for her birthday, she wants him to go on stage because they'll let people go up and play.
When he's like
so he
15
goes,
or something, 17 or
yeah, and he goes up and plays, and you know, he talks about how nervous he is, and then decides he's going to ask the drummer, this jazz drummer who I still don't know who he is, but for lessons.
yeah.
Guy comes over, does one lesson with him, and after that he's like, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna figure out how to do it my way.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna teach myself, right?
Right.
The other theme, the way I would word it, is he seems to live life without expectations.
Yeah.
And yet, like, you know, he is so excited when his daughter comes and says, I want to learn how to play drums. And yet the sense I get from him is, yeah, but if she'd come and said, I want to learn how to play violin, like, yeah, he wouldn't have been able to teach her that, but he would have loved it.
I feel like you would have learned it.
Yeah, probably.
Well, the piano, he says he didn't know how to play piano, so he just started teaching himself how to play it.
Teach himself how to play, which is how he knows how to play guitar. Or not guitar, drums. Taught himself how to do it. Probably. Anyway, it's just that idea of, like, I don't know what's next, but it'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll learn something from it. Like, I had that conversation with a guy the other day where he talked about, you know, here's this thing I've been doing for 20 years. And he goes, and it worked. And he goes, but it might not have worked. It might have failed. And I said, but would it have failed?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, because the sense I get from you is you still would have looked at it. And he goes, oh no, it would have been valuable information for me. He's like, so yes, it would have been a benefit. I just wouldn't have the business to show for it.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of, he's not being defined by what doesn't work. He's simply saying, here's the experience I had, and I'm going to incorporate it into my life now.
Yeah, I think the one more I would throw out first when you were talking about the albums. I remember the Christmas that I got the first album. I remember like listening to it in my garage while my brother was playing with his like track car set out in the garage. And it was funny because at that time it was kind of just like rumored, because there wasn't a whole lot, if I remember right, there wasn't a whole lot of information on the album cover, but it was kind of just like whispers of like, dude, this is Dave Grohl. Like, this is his solo project. He did everything. Did you hear that? And it's like, but no one, like, it wasn't really like public or out there, because I think he was still kind of easing back into like, can I even play music again after everything I just went through? But but I think another cool thing is, you know, the way he describes how he just felt like I just don't fit in, and I, you know, am different in like ways that could easily be made fun of. And, you know, like the punk in me basically is like, I'm trying to keep it under wraps, but, and then going to Chicago with his cousin and like
his cousin,
and having that experience with music where he's like, oh my gosh, I found me, right? I found people like me. So there's like this, I don't fit in. And then I found kind of my tribe type of a thing around music. But I think a lot of people, not just with music, but a lot of people find that, and then they don't grow beyond that.
Yeah.
But like then throughout the book, I mean, the dude's like fawning over Elton John and like Neil Diamond and like all the rock greats and like, you know, just all like almost every genre of music represented, right? It's just like, my identity is I love music, and like I draw from and enjoy and see beauty and like personal expression and find meaning in like all sorts of music. And I think that's like a really cool developmental curve that if we grow into it, like it could be music, it could be a number of different things, but like there's that time of identity development as a teenager, right? Where you obviously know every teenager feels insecure and doesn't feel like they fit in. And when you find something that's like, hey, here's you and there's people, right? It's like, sweet, I can do this, right? And then, but then like growing beyond that and connecting to everything that, like the human experience, like you were saying, Rob, it's just like, yeah, these are all musicians and they all happen to be people just like you. And they all have friends that die and they all have like struggles that they go through and they have massive successes. And I think they're not sitting there talking about like, well, I can't believe you play that kind of music because that music blows, right? It's like, that's a teenage conversation, right? But an adult conversation when you've grown beyond it is like, hey, what's your story? You know, what, like, and, you know, where do you find purpose in what you're creating? And here's what I'm creating. And, you know, there's respect all around. I think he was kind of like blown away that Elton John knew who he was, right? And it's like, well, yeah, because Elton John's a human too. And he sees the struggle and sees, you know, what you're creating and respects it just like you respect his.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Mike, there's like an authenticity type thing that I like, this openness he has. I think that comes, maybe Matt, you were saying this too, where it's like, you have to kind of know yourself to do that. Or at least be willing to learn more about yourself and to understand like, well, this is my thing and this is the way I do it. Because that's the kind of thing that like, as I listened to it, I remember finishing and thinking, this is cool, but he has a personality that's different than mine. Like I'm not a risk taker the way he is. And this is the same thing that Carl Whitaker in the family therapy field says. You know, he, at the end of his, you know, people would ask him, well, how do you teach people how to do what you do in the therapy room? And he said, you can't do what I do in the therapy room. You have to be you in the room. Don't try to be me in the room. It won't work. And I actually appreciate that Dave Grohl's, you know, Foo Fighter wasn't just like a Nirvana copy. Like, you know, Mike, maybe that's the album that he's talking about, but I can't remember which one. But he said, when we wrote this album, I was really into classic 70s rock at the time, and or something like that, or easy listening. And so he's like, that really came out in that album. And it was like, that's just kind of where I was. And he has the luxury, as he's pointed out multiple times in the book, of like, we could do it because we wanted to at this point, because they got out of their contract with Geffen Records. And so now we do it because we want to. We don't have to do it because we're under contract for 4 more albums or whatever it is. But I think it's, Matt, you're talking about this idea of like expanding, moving beyond that. I do think that requires being able to know ourselves enough and say, it's okay if I do this way. It's, you do yours your way, and I can find the mutual respect to say, I like that you do that way. I don't do it that way. That's why I used to tell my kids this, like, if you want to be a really good musician, and you want to be a really good punk band, don't listen to only punk. Listen to like classical, and listen to, because you pull the things from other people who are creating, and then you infuse that into what you're making. But if all you're listening to is punk, you're gonna duplicate the guy before you. I mean, I've done that. I've literally rewritten songs, but that was really good. I'm like, oh, it's a Goldfinger song, huh? You know, like, so I think I just found it really kind of encouraging, because he has at the end these kind of like, think of an experience like this, and here's your prompt to get you to help you do the thing you want to do. He doesn't, you know, he says, think, this was my experience. What was yours? And how does that make you move towards the thing you want to do? And I think about, you know, like I've told you guys, I like writing. And it's funny. I like writing, not because, I mean, writing has never done anything for me except for, I guess, get me through grad school and get me some publications. But I like writing because I think I'm the funniest person in the world when I'm writing. Even if nobody reads it and nobody comments on it, I think, you guys got to read what I wrote. I am so freaking funny. And it feels like when I'm writing, it feels like I might be the greatest man to ever live. Like, and I don't actually mean like I'm better than anybody else, but it's like I am living at my fullest potential in this moment right now. And I like to imagine that, like, when I read this, and Matt, with what you're saying of like, you move beyond this space where it's like, no, you can't do that. Like, that band sold out. You can't like them. It's like, well, I like them. It's cool. Like, I don't remember who he was talking about, but he said, this is when he tells the story about playing with Huey Lewis. But he said somebody's favorite band, like 2 favorite albums, was this one by Huey Lewis and this one by Mariah Carey. And he's like, what? I thought, yeah, but then he's like, Huey Lewis is like amazing. He had this like crappy plastic harmonica and he belted out the most amazing harmonica solo I've ever heard. So it's like, as soon as he realizes like this is a human and I can respect what he's doing, then it's like, man, I can get on board with this.
Funny Mariah Carey story real fast.
Finally.
I just saw this video where she's being interviewed. This is like back probably in like the early 90s, I guess, when she was becoming big. And it was some British guy interviewing her. And I can't remember what the question was, but they got talking about like the electricity bill. And she's like, oh, we don't pay for that. And he's like, yeah, you do. Like, he's like, he was talking about how they pay for electricity in England. And she's like, oh, we don't have to do that in the United States. He's like, yeah, you do. And there's a bill. She's like, what do you mean? We have to pay for that? That's like,
oh my gosh. Dude, that's like in is it Arrested Development? She's like, what does a gallon of milk cost? $10? And somebody's like, have you ever been to the store? That's what's funny. Like, I've seen a video. It was like an Instagram reel or something of Dave Grohl. Someone's driving a car and they're passing and they see it's Dave Grohl. It's just a Toyota Sienna and he's driving it and he sees him. And he's like rocking out in his car. It's like, Dave, what would it be so weird to see Dave Grohl just driving a Toyota Sienna down the road? Like, it's just kind of funny. Just seems like a normal dude who's like, he's in it because he loves it and he loves the life he's living. He's excited about life, not because he wants to be a hot rock star or anything like that.
Well, yeah, that story about. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go
ahead. I think it was Madison Square Garden. There was some like multi-band concert or something. So he's like getting there and he's like, I'm not going to name names because, I don't want to like throw anybody under the bus, basically. But he's like, I saw one older rock star that was like literally like layers of paint and like, trying to keep it young. And then I saw this other dude, just fat guy in leather pants and a shirt that he was popping out of. And he's like, I'm going to be that.
Yeah. That guy's lived his life, man.
Yeah.
Like, its pretense was gone. It's like, you're just doing it because you love it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that to me, I think it's funny. Part of what I think appeals to, at least to you and I, Rob, from what you've said and what I feel, but is he does just seem very normal, right? It's why I love like any commercial he's in, like the Super Bowl commercial where it's like, thank you, Canada. And he goes and lists off all these dumb things that Canada's given us. Because it just feels very like relatable, right? Like there's just something about it. And then I think, right. And this is a guy who is apparently, like friends with Paul McCartney and Elton John. And I think, no, Elton John does not seem accessible to me.
Yeah.
And yet I think, right. But again, for him, it doesn't seem to be it's about the person.
Yeah.
And finding something in the relationship. And that's, I think, especially as dudes, as we're, raising our kids, they're going to hit that age and they're going to do like he did. And they're going to find that scene that seems to speak to them. And they're going to go all in on it. One, remember how important that is to your kid. You went through it at some point too. You probably just may not remember it in the same way, but that need to belong and to be a part is huge in that age. But it also, I think, right, at some point he had to grow past that. He had to learn to see that, Elton John and Neil Diamond and these guys are not, and Huey Lewis are not just old dudes that sing music that's not his style. And so as dads, I think, we kind of have that responsibility to keep encouraging our kids to look and to expand and to grow and to keep being open to things that may not seem Like it fits with their particular scene or identity.
Yeah, I wondered that when he, talks about dropping out of school to go join Scream and how his dad's like, it's not going to last or whatever he says. And his mom says, well, you better be good. And I think, man, it did make me think too, like, I hope, because I like the idea of what one of the things we should be doing in life is figuring out who we are as humans, not necessarily how successful we'll be or what we can accomplish or not accomplish. Because some of these, Dave Grohl is obviously a statistical anomaly in terms of the amount of success he achieved, but also in terms of like even just taking people who drop out of school to join and pursue their passion of being in music, who then eventually just quit because I did this for 25 years and I'm still working at Pizza Hut and nobody likes my band. And it, like one of the bands I really like, the Swellers, eventually they just quit because they're like, we were always just a middle tier band. We couldn't break past to the next thing. And so he's an anomaly in a number of ways. But the fact that he's saying, I just wanted to be myself and be me. The most I could do, or the more I could do to help my own kids get that, like get a sense of like, I understand myself better and I know how to do this the way I want to do this. Like my son Stuart the other day, he just built a bookshelf. And I was like, well, did you watch some videos? He's like, no, but I took a construction class. It looks freaking awesome. It looks perfect. Like I'm staring at it like, what? It came out totally perfect. I don't understand. Because mine would be like, don't push it. Because if you do it, the whole thing collapses. But it's like he's just kind of
bookshelf.
He's just kind of leaning into like things that he likes. And I think, cool, man. If you decide in the end that college isn't going to be for you, okay. Like I want you to have certain experiences there, but maybe it's not gonna be your place. I don't know that that's what it'll do or not, but I think cool. Then I want to help you go where you're going to go and feel like you're living the life you want to live. I hope my kids feel like Dave Grohl. I'm living the life I want to live, and finding purpose and meaning and connection in it.
Well, and the value in the experience to me, like I was talking to a guy the other day, and he said, I was doing something and I was feeling quite neutral. And he said, and I happened to turn and look in a mirror while I was doing this thing. And he said, and the look on my face said, get away from me. I hate you. And he goes, I mean, I don't know what to do with that. And I said, that's pretty much all you need to do with it. Like you need to know that that's there. You need to know that there's potential that people see you that way, so that when someone comes up and says, "Hey, are you okay?" You're not like, "Gosh, why are you asking me that all the time?" Well, they're asking you that because you look like you want to punch somebody in the face. Like, go ahead and understand that about yourself, right? Understand, like, hey, here's this experience I just had. What does this experience say about me? What can I learn about myself from this experience? It doesn't mean I have to change it. Like if you don't feel like walking around with a grin on your face, don't walk around with a grin on your face. I don't care. But understand right? Like understand those things about yourself. And I think that's like, as I've been reading through it, it's that it almost seems like the phrase that I've had in my head is it's like this grand experiment for him. Mm-hmm. Like, let's just see what this next thing teaches me. Let's just see what I can learn out of this next experience I had. And that's a very, I think it's a difficult way to learn how to see life.
Yeah.
So what parting thoughts do you have besides telling people, if you haven't picked up the book, go get the book, The Storyteller, and look for how it will shape you into the man you're going to be? What thoughts do you have? Any other parting thoughts?
I want to listen to more Foo Fighters.
I've actually been still. There are some songs that I really like, but some songs it's like it's not really my style.
Yeah.
But because I like him so much and I like the story so much, it's a little bit like a band called Hot Water Music. It's like I don't really like their style. Some songs I do, but the the lead singer and one of the guitar players, I'm like, I like these guys so much. They seem like such honest, genuine dudes. It's like, well, I want to support your music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know that I would add anything other than just whether it's this book or something else. I think finding something that brings you back to yourself in a way. Like I feel like in a lot of ways this did that for me.
Maybe too.
I think finding that and doing it regularly is like really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's too many things that we push off that are parts of ourselves. We talked about this a long time ago in episodes. It's like stuff we give up when we become adults. It's like even dumb things like wearing a hat backwards. Being like, there I am. But, and the other thing I'll say is since at least our loose plan, I think, is to try to do this once a month. My proposal for the next book, because it ties into Matt's saying, find things, find yourself. I think I might propose The Comfort Crisis.
Let's do it.
You might
So
propose, or you just did?
I just did.
Well, let's do it then.
I am proposing, and we are doing The Comfort Crisis by Micheal Easter. And we'll follow up on Rob's rucking when we do that, because that's where I got the rucking stuff.
Nice.
Okay.
And that'll be in 4 weeks, Spacemen. That'll be September 18th, I believe, is when they'll hear it. Trust me, I did the math on it. Don't worry about it. So go and get some pillows and arrange them like a drum set and learn to play the drums just like Dave Grohl did.
On pillows.
And maybe you can use your teeth too. He also did that. And then come back next time and catch us on the Manspace Book Club. You guys are supposed to join in.